going to try to record this, but England are currently playing the Netherlands in the Euros, and they've just scored a goal. So there's been a loud cheer, so we might again be interrupted by the people in the pubs and flats and houses surrounding me. But anyway, I've previously made a couple of videos about locations in GTA 6. Firstly, I kind of threw out a load of predictions of places we could see based on real life locations, and the other one was about world events. It was a list of world events in GTA 6, which was leaked a while ago, and in that video I went through, I think, all of them. There were more than 800, and some are more interesting than others, but in this video I wanted to go into a bit more depth about 6 of those world events, which I mentioned before, and those 6 events mentioned locations. And so I wanted to talk about those and talk about what they could potentially be based on or look like in the game. But before that, I just want to say that obviously this world events list was leaked a while ago, and we're not going to get the game for at least another year. So these might not feature at all. A lot could change in that time. So first up, there was an event called the Abandoned Research Outpost. Now, it didn't take much research for me to realise that this could potentially be the Aerojet Dade rocket facility, which is in Homestead in Florida. So it is in Florida. As we know, GTA 6 is going to be set in a fictional version of Florida, and this is properly in the Everglades. It was a rocket test site built in the 1960s, but it's since been abandoned. As you can see here, these are pictures from it. It's been abandoned, and it's become quite popular among urban explorers and so on. And interestingly, when it was abandoned with a rocket still inside, which is very cool. And yeah, I mean, I can just imagine this being a location in GTA. You're kind of trawling through the Everglades, and in the middle of nowhere there's this huge kind of almost Soviet looking structure, and you can go inside and there's a rocket inside and it's abandoned, and maybe there's some people hanging around or doing something dodgy, or maybe there's some wild animals, who knows. I just kind of thinking also like Red Dead 2, where you would be in the middle of nowhere and you'd come across a dilapidated building and something would be going on there. So I could definitely imagine this in GTA. Again, we don't know for sure that this abandoned research outpost is going to look like this, but I wouldn't be surprised if this heavily inspired it. Next up, we've got Big Cat Mansion. Now, I'm sure everyone else thought the same thing as me when they saw this on the list, and that was Big Cat Rescue, owned and run by Carol Baskin there and her husband Howard Baskin. And of course, this is a Big Cat Rescue. It just kind of does what it says on the tin. It's a Big Cat Rescue park for kind of sick, injured, mistreated, abandoned tigers, lions, all sorts of things. But I mean, it wouldn't be that famous on its own, but of course it was made famous by Tiger King, that kind of lockdown sensation, the Netflix show Tiger King. I'm not going to go into detail about what it is if you haven't seen it, but I'd recommend giving it a watch. But I mean, if you've seen this show, and I'm sure most people watching this have, I mean, is this not just the most GTA show ever? The stuff that happens in this show, honestly. Joe Exotic there is, and even Carol Baskin, they're both very kind of GTA-like characters, and they're real people. So yeah, you can totally imagine this kind of being translated into GTA. I mean, we've seen GTA Online and GTA 5 make fun of people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, so you could definitely imagine someone as kind of so kind of involved in the zeitgeist, I suppose, not to get all like philosophical, but Joe Exotic is very much one of those big figures that everyone knows about these days. Although Tiger King is a few years old now, obviously it would have been massive at the time they were working on GTA Online, so you could definitely imagine it being in the game in some form and references to it. Big Cat Rescue was in Tampa at the time. I think a few years ago it moved, or fairly recently even, I don't know the exact date, it moved to Arkansas, but obviously up until recently, or fairly recently, it was in Florida, so it's definitely possible. Even if it wasn't in Florida, to be quite frank, I think it could still be an inspiration just by how mad that story was. And, we get big cats and all sorts of wild animals in GTA games, so why not have an entire park dedicated to them? I mean, I don't remember ever having a zoo in a GTA game, but that would be fun. That would certainly be fun. Next up, we have the Satanist House. So there was a house called the Halloween House in New York State, in Poughkeepsie. I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. It's since been burnt down and demolished, but it was owned by the Church of Satan, which, for those who don't know, is not as evil as it sounds. They don't actually worship Satan as a kind of deity. I think they're all basically atheists. But the Church of Satan, someone burnt this one down and it was demolished, but the Church of Satan also owned another property called the Black House in San Francisco, I believe in the 90s. That's also since been demolished and is now gone. But to be quite frank, I think when they say Satanist House, they probably just mean kind of a creepy old house with, maybe signs that there's been some sort of sacrifice in there, maybe pentagrams on the walls, maybe a goat's head or something, weird symbols. Maybe you go in and doors start slamming behind you, or you see shadows on the wall or something. Maybe it's abandoned, maybe it's not abandoned, maybe you hear voices in there or something. Just quite a cool, creepy thing. I don't think it's necessarily based off either of the houses we saw before. It probably will just be something completely unique. Next up, we have the Spaceship House. Now, again, after some brief research, it seems like this is a clear reference to the UFO House, which is in Homestead, Florida. This was built in the 70s, inspired by the kind of space age era at the time. As you can see, it looks very kind of futuristic and looks like a spaceship or a UFO. And I mean, there it is in kind of orangey pink colour. Obviously abandoned. It's since been abandoned. I believe there were a few of these actually built, abandoned now. So you could definitely imagine this in a GTA game, either abandoned or, not abandoned. In that case, this is a UFO house in Pensacola Beach, Florida. Another house that's known as the UFO House, and this one is not abandoned. Looks slightly different, but very much still like a UFO. And we know Rockstar loves its UFOs. And there are a few of these around the world, actually. It would be really cool to kind of own one in a GTA game, but I'm not sure that's what we'll see in GTA 6. But in some form, we'll probably see a UFO house or a kind of abandoned or still functional. I don't know. Next, we have the Underwater Research Facility. Now, this seems like a pretty clear reference to the Aquarius Reef Base in Key Largo in the Florida Keys. Now, this is another thing I didn't know about before researching for GTA 6, and this is so cool. This is the world's only undersea research lab. It's kind of, there it is, it looks very cool. It's used to study and preserve marine ecosystems. Just a very kind of, can you imagine scuba diving or whatever in GTA 6 and coming across this? It looks very kind of foreboding and creepy, but also very interesting and cool. And I hope if we do have something like this in the game, we're able to go inside In GTA 5, this is another picture of it, but in GTA 5 we did a lot of kind of underwater, well, we did a fair number of underwater missions. We did some in that little submersible, we did some diving missions, diving through, and even in GTA Online, diving, swimming through kind of pipes and stuff, for example, in like the Cayo Perico heist and stuff. And considering that GTA 6 is going to be set in Florida, with an emphasis on Vice City, I imagine that we'll have a lot of underwater missions still to come and underwater activities, I hope. And if you actually go back and watch my video on the world events, there's quite a few things that relate to water. So that would be really interesting to see, even if it's not, I'd love a thing like, I was thinking of LA Noire the other day, where you have random locations that pop up on your map and you kind of as question marks, and you go over and explore them, and then they, something like this, even if there's not a specific main story mission there, if you go there, you can explore it a bit. That would be really interesting. Next up, the toxic floating trash island. Now, my first thought was the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is in the northern Pacific Ocean, the north of the Pacific Ocean. This is something, obviously, I'm sure we all know about. We all learned about it at school, at least if you went to school in the last, 20 years or something, probably. And this is essentially where, because of the ocean's currents, I'm trying to simplify. To be honest, I don't fully understand it myself, so I'm trying to keep it as vague and simple as possible. But because of the ocean's currents, a lot of the rubbish, mainly plastic, from a large part of the world has kind of accumulated here and formed this huge island. It's massive. And we know that, Rockstar likes to satirize current events and trending topics and make fun of the world. And what's more current than issues like climate change and environmental issues? So it would definitely make sense for something like this to be in the game, even if, again, it's not marked on the map. It's just if you go out far enough on this one specific spot of the map, you come across this massive thing of rubbish. It would be a nice little Easter egg, and again, a way of satirizing the world. Alternatively, it could also be this, which is I don't know how to say this. Is it Joyshi floating bottle island in Isla Mujeres in Mexico? I really apologize if I've said that wrong. I don't speak Spanish. This is a weird one, and something you could definitely actually imagine seeing in a Rockstar game, especially GTA. This is a small, tiny island, that's the whole of it there, built by a guy who basically filled up bags with plastic bottles and tied them to these raft things and nestled them in mangroves. And this whole island, in which there's there's a house and plants and all sorts, is basically floating on plastic bottles that are tied together. I think there was a previous version of this island and it kind of fell apart. And I believe this one in the past few years has also fallen apart. And I think there may have been some rubbish left behind and stuff that's caused a bit of a fuss. So it could potentially be this, but to be honest, I think I'm leaning more towards the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, whatever it's called, because obviously this is quite elaborate. I don't see how it's toxic necessarily, and it's in Mexico. It's not in Florida or even in the USA. So, I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. Next, the Fountain of Youth. Now, this is an actual place, word for word the same, in St. Augustine, Florida. It's an attraction, kind of tourist attraction, which over the years has been kind of quite sensationalized and stuff, so you don't really know the full truth behind it, but it could potentially be pretty significant in the history of Florida. So you can imagine it might also be in the history of Leonida, the state, of Florida in GTA. in the GTA world now. It's basically claimed that this could be the landing site of, again, I'm going to struggle to say this, is it Ponce de Leon? He's basically the Spanish explorer who conquered Florida, and after whom it kind of seems most likely that Leonida has been named, de Leon. So yeah, he's said to have kind of landed here and during his kind of quests, and it's also said that he was, when he kind of came across Florida, he was looking for this mythical fountain of youth, which, you know, I'm sure we've all heard of when you've watched like Pirates of the Caribbean and so on. This kind of this spring where if you drink the water you'll stay young forever, that kind of thing. This is obviously not, it's called the Fountain of Youth. I imagine if you drank the water here you'd probably just get, you know, salmonella or listeria or something, probably not eternal youth. But anyway, that brings us to the end of this video on that nice somber note. What do you make of this location? Other locations, as I've said, were mentioned in this long list of world events, but I wanted to focus on these ones. And what locations do you think will feature in GTA 6? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. And if you're interested in mine, please go back and watch my previous video about my predictions, and also the world events video, which I apologize is quite long and rambly, but there are over 800 world events that I went through in that video. So if you have time, set yourself down with a nice cup of tea or something and have a listen.